Hello, my name is Tim Shoebridge. Welcome to this video. Do not adjust your television sets. What you're going to hear in this video is some enthusiasm, and what you're going to see very occasionally is me smiling. This is going to be a video that's positive, and I'm gushing over the synthesizer in front of me. It is the Moog Muse. I know that sounds rather ridiculous, doesn't it, that I actually do like the synthesizer. I do think that a number of people maybe took my last video a little bit wrongly, that I was out to criticize it, out to I don't know, bad name it. I was just showing you what was happening with mine and asking, does anyone else have the same problem? That's all I was doing. Anyway, let's move on. Positivity and smiling. I want to give you a little bit of a backstory about the Muse and why I've got one, or how I've ended up getting one. When it was first announced and then released, I was always going to get one, because for me it seemed to tick all the boxes, as we say, right? In terms of its capabilities, in terms of the sound, of the potential sound from it. I really thought it, and also the look of it, it's a fantastic, amazing hands-on control. I really thought it was a synth that I was going to get. It was kind of a poly synth that was, you know, missing from my collection of, my small collection of instruments that I own. But before I ended up taking the plunge and getting one, something happened. And what happened was Dreadbox released their limited edition analog polysynth, a synth called the Musings Adept Edition, and I leapt at it. I'm a huge fan of Dreadbox, always have been, and I'm very, very pleased that I did leap at it. It was an expensive, exclusive instrument, but the sound of it is just so wonderful, and I really do dig it. And I'm going to use strange adjectives that we have invented to describe food. I'm going to say things like, it sounds alive. Well, maybe we don't describe food as alive, do we? Maybe some parts of the world we do. Creamy, buttery, smooth, yet crunchy, organic. It really is a wonderful sounding instrument, the Musings Adept. And so once I had that, well, why would I need a Muse? I just don't anymore. So why have I got one, or why did I decide to get one? It sounds a bit weird, but I was actually looking through its user manual, which I generally don't decide on purchases based on a user manual. But as I was going through the user manual for the Muse, it was clear to me that this synthesizer is packed with some amazing features, some really quite advanced features and some unusual features. And I just thought to myself, wow, this instrument really sounds like it could be a sound designer's dream. If you want to program a synthesizer, then there are just so many good things inside it. So this is where this video is coming from. I want to sort of like start on my journey of sharing with you the things that are inside this synth that actually really do make me feel very, very creative, very enthusiastic about it. And we're going to start off with just one single little feature. That's what I'm going to have in this video, is just one single little feature. I'm going to describe what it is. We're going to build a patch that utilizes it, and I'm going to play you a few sound examples of how you could use it. And so that is why this video is called a part 1 video, because I'm really hoping, I can't promise, but I'm really hoping that I'll follow it up with a number of other videos in the future, which will pick on other things about the Muse that I really do love. So let's get stuck in with this one single feature, which is actually one single menu option deep down inside the synthesizer. Let's take a look. So what is this singular menu option I'm talking about? It's in the VCA section, which is over here. I think my microphone may be just obscuring it. Sorry about that. If we go into the little more menu of the VCA section, here we have some options, not that many. If we scroll down, we will find at the very bottom, it's that one there. It's called LFO Phase Spread, and it's currently off. By default, it's always off. What does this do? This is a binaural mode. Basically, it doesn't say binaural mode here, but it does mention binaural mode in the user manual. Let me give you a very, very brief history of my understanding of binaural mode. I don't like that term, to be honest with you, but never mind. It was coined by UDO with their Super 6 synth. They had this binaural mode in it, but that wasn't the first synthesizer that I saw this sort of facility, this capability in. The first synth that I found that had this binaural mode was a Waldorf Kyra, and they didn't call it binaural mode at all. As I said, UDO have coined that phrase. But what is binaural mode? Now, the way that those two synthesizers work is basically this. They take a voice that you're going to play when you hold down a note. Normally it's one voice per note, right? And that is why you have a certain amount of polyphony. The number of voices that you've got available to you dictates the number of notes that you can play simultaneously. Now in binaural mode, they take two voices per note instead of one. One of those voices is dedicated to the left channel in the stereo field of your outputs, and the other voice is dedicated to the right channel. Those voices, in terms of their parameters, their settings, filter settings, oscillator settings, everything else, are cloned. They are sort of clones of each other. Now, the reason why we have two of them is because some synth settings are not cloned, and those synth settings are generally going to be the LFO or LFOs, depending on which synth we're talking about here. So the LFOs are generating a waveform, and what binaural mode does is it inverts that waveform, shifts the phase of that waveform in one of the channels, so that you get a really wonderful stereo effect if your LFO is modulating something like pitch or filter cutoff, or all the normal things that we like to modulate with our LFOs. So the only synth parameters that differ between those two voices is going to be the LFO phases. Everything else stays the same. And as I said, this gives a wonderful stereo effect. There is a downside of this binaural mode in both the Kyra and in the Super 6, and that is that it halves your available polyphony, because now you're playing two voices every time you hold down a note. Now, how does that relate to the Muse? Well, the Muse doesn't do the same thing that those two synths does. It doesn't halve your polyphony. It does something very clever. I really think the implementation here in the Muse is brilliant. It is very, very clever. Now, what we're going to do is set up a patch, and then I'm going to turn this parameter on, and then we will hear the difference, and I'll explain what's going on. First of all, we need to set up a patch, a very simple patch that's got some LFO modulation going on in it. So at the moment, I've got an init patch. I've actually added some reverb settings because I find that the diffusion delay is a bit fiddly to set up. So I've set up the diffusion delay how I like for a nice bit of ambient reverb, and I've saved it as an initialized patch. It sounds like this. So you can hear there's bags of reverb going on. But it's just an initialized patch. Other than that, what I'm going to do is go over to the LFO section over here. I'm going to press that More button so that we go to the LFOs menu. Now, we have two LFOs here over on the left hand side. They are digital LFOs. They're digitally generated waveforms. Unlike the modulation oscillator sitting right next to the two VCOs, this is a voltage controlled oscillator. It's our third voltage controlled oscillator. Binaural mode on the Muse does not work with the modulation oscillator. It only works with the digital oscillators. So that's the first thing you need to understand. Second thing is that by default, these LFOs, these digital LFOs, work in global mode. They affect all voices the same, and we want to turn that feature off. We want to make these polyphonic LFOs, and there is a setting in the menu here LFO type, you see it there, it's set to global by default. We're going to turn that to polyphonic mode, which is per voice. That's the first thing we have to do with our LFOs, is make them polyphonic, make them per voice. That's the first thing. Let's come out of that menu. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use that LFO to modulate something, and probably the classic thing to modulate is going to be filter cutoff. So I'm going to hold down a note. I'm going to turn down the filter cutoff so that we actually hear some modulation, and then I'm going to set the LFO to modulate it, and that's very, very simple to do. We just have to press this assign button and then twist the cutoff control, and the amount that we turn it is the amount of modulation. Now I'm not affecting the cutoff control like I was before. Now I'm setting the modulation amount either positive or negative. You can see there it's positive, so we get that effect. That's actually good enough. I'm going to sort of just say OK to that and save that. So now I've got my LFO modulation going on. Now you'll hear there another setting that I want to change, and that is the fact that that LFO is free running in the background, and depending on when I decide to play notes, I'll catch it at whatever point it is in its waveform cycle. See, I want it to be consistent because that way you can hear exactly how binaural mode is working. So there's a button over here called KB reset, keyboard reset, which means that this LFO will reset its phase every time we hold down a note. So if I put that button on now, we get a very consistent effect. It's always coming in, if you like, and we get that swell. No matter when I hold down a note, we get that swell. It's going to be much easier for us to hear the binaural effect now, but you don't have to have keyboard reset turned on to have binaural mode. Alright, so far so good. Right, the next thing that we need to do to set up to be ready for binaural mode is we need to look at the stereo panning of our patch that we've got going on here. There's a pan control for setting the overall sort of like pan of where we want to place it in the stereo field. We're not going to touch that. It's this pan spread control underneath that we're going to touch. Now by default it's all off, which means everything is centered, but we can turn it all the way up to maximum. So now when I hold down some notes, some of those notes are playing in the left channel, some of them are playing in the right channel, and there's an algorithm behind the scenes determining how that works. You can fiddle around with that algorithm inside the menu system of the Muse, but by default it's going to sort of like do ping pong. One voice over on the left, another on the right, like this. Very predictable, okay? So the way that binaural mode works on the Muse is that when you have some pan spread going on, it doesn't have to be at maximum, but you have to have some pan spread going on so that the synthesizer behind the scenes is choosing a dominant channel, left or right, for each note. Once you have that set up, now we're ready for binaural mode to kick in. So just before we turn it on, let's just hear what happens when I play the same note over and over again. We get that same ascending modulation kicking in, that same swell, and we get each voice on alternate channels. Now let's go into the VCA menu and turn on that LFO phase spread parameter. Now it's turned on, listen to the difference. One voice in one channel is that same swell, which I believe is the left channel, and then the right channel voice is got an inverted phase of its LFO. So rather than the swell, it has a rapid decline before the LFO kicks in. So rather than doing what the Kyra does and the Super 6 does, which is to sort of like halve the number of available voices to you, what the Muse is doing is it's using binaural mode, inversion of the LFO phase, but it's doing it on alternative notes. It's doing it dependent on the algorithm behind the scenes that chooses which channel is the dominant channel to play the voice in. So you get some really interesting effects like this. Obviously we've got 100% spread at the moment. Let's turn it down a bit to make it much more subtle. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go into the mod map and I'm going to just adjust the amount of modulation that we chose for the filter cutoff. I'm going to turn it down a bit because it's a bit dramatic. Let's speed up the LFO as well. So let me play you with and without this setting. So it's on at the moment, we get this. And let's turn it off, we get this. On. Off. There's nothing wrong with it when it's off. That's a classic sound and we program that into our synthesizers all the time. Right? Don't get me wrong, it's a great effect. But having this ability to now invert those phases across the left and right channels. That is the binaural effect. To be honest with you, it works more with ambient kinds of patches rather than sort of like more obvious modulations like this one. But it is an amazingly cool effect to have in the Muse. It is just one single menu option described in the user manual as to how to do this, but I'm blown away by the fact that it does it. It's really, really cool.